It's 2 a.m. You hear something downstairs, and there's no time to debate what firearm you should have chosen. That decision was made months or years ago. So which is better for home defense? Pistol, shotgun, or AR-15? Each has advantages and drawbacks. Today, we'll compare all three on what matters most: maneuverability, recoil, capacity, overpenetration, and cost. By the end, you'll know which option may fit your situation best. Let's get into it. Let's start with the handgun, because for a huge percentage of homeowners, this ends up being the practical default, and there are real reasons for that, not just convenience. The case for the pistol. The single biggest advantage a handgun has over the other two options in this video is maneuverability. In a real home, you're not standing in an open field. You're moving through hallways, around door frames, past furniture, possibly with one hand occupied because you're guiding a family member to safety or holding a phone to call 911. A compact or full-size handgun can be controlled one-handed if it absolutely has to be, moved around tight corners without the barrel catching on a door frame, and kept close to the body in a way a long gun simply can't match. It's also the option most people already have quick access to, because it's the easiest of the three to store in a way that's both secure and fast to access. A quality access safe by the nightstand, for example, without the storage footprint of a long gun. The trade-offs. Here's what the pistol gives up in exchange for that maneuverability, and it's significant. Recoil management and shot placement under a handgun's inherently shorter sight radius is a genuinely harder skill to develop than it is with a shotgun or rifle, especially under the adrenaline and impaired fine motor control that comes with an actual high-stress encounter, not a calm range session. Handgun rounds also, generally speaking, carry less immediate stopping power per hit compared to a shotgun's buckshot pattern or a rifle round, which means shot placement matters even more, and multiple accurate hits may be needed where a shotgun could resolve things with fewer. The bottom line on the pistol, it's the most flexible, most maneuverable option, but it demands the most trigger time and training investment to run well under pressure, because everything about it, recoil control, sight acquisition, follow-up shot speed, is harder to master than the other two platforms. Now let's talk about the shotgun, which has been the traditional go-to home defense recommendation for generations, and for good reason. The case for the shotgun. A shotgun loaded with buckshot delivers a genuinely devastating amount of energy on target with a single trigger pull, and the spread pattern means precise aim matters somewhat less than it does with a single projectile. Though I want to be clear, spread, at typical indoor home defense distances, is much tighter than a lot of people assume from movies. At the actual distances involved in a home encounter, a shotgun pattern is still a fairly tight group, not the wide spray Hollywood suggests. There's also a psychological and deterrent factor that a lot of experienced instructors talk about. The distinct sound of racking a pump shotgun is one of the most universally recognized sounds there is, and in some documented cases, that sound alone has been enough to end a confrontation before a shot was ever fired. The trade-offs. Here's where the shotgun's reputation runs into reality. Recoil is genuinely significant, especially with full-power buckshot loads, and for a lot of shooters, particularly smaller frame shooters, or anyone who hasn't specifically trained with a shotgun under stress, that recoil translates directly into slower, less accurate follow-up shot, exactly when a follow-up shot might be needed most. Capacity is also a real limitation. A typical home defense pump or semi-auto shotgun holds somewhere in the range of 5 to 8 rounds depending on the model and magazine tube length, without extension. That's meaningfully less than a pistol's typical magazine capacity and significantly less than an AR-15's standard magazine. Maneuverability sits in the middle of our three options. Better than most people expect in tight hallways with a shorter-barreled defensive model, but still a long gun, which means corners, door frames, and one-handed operation are genuinely harder than with a pistol. The bottom line on the shotgun: devastating stopping power per trigger pull, and a strong deterrent factor, but real recoil to manage, limited capacity, and a training curve that's often underestimated because people assume just pointed in their direction is enough. It isn't. Before we get to the AR-15, I want to address something a lot of these comparison videos skip entirely. None of these platforms are magic. Every single one of them requires actual training, actual practice, and an actual plan for your specific home. Not just owning the gun. A shotgun sitting in a closet, unracked and untrained with, is not more effective than a pistol you've put 500 rounds through and trained with at low light. This is the one that surprises people, because a lot of new gun owners assume an AR-15 is overkill for home defense, or somehow inappropriate for an indoor scenario, something built for a battlefield or a range bag, not a hallway at 2 a.m. The data and a lot of professional defensive trainers actually disagree, and it's worth slowing down and understanding exactly why, because this is probably the most counterintuitive section of the entire video. The case for the AR-15 recoil is, somewhat counterintuitively, the AR-15's biggest home defense advantage. The 5.56/223 cartridge, combined with the rifle's overall weight and the direct impingement or piston system absorbing a portion of that recoil impulse before it ever reaches your shoulder, produces significantly less felt recoil than either a shotgun with buckshot or, for a lot of shooters, even a full-size handgun in a defensive caliber. This isn't a small or marginal difference. Shooters who struggle to control rapid, accurate follow-up shots with a shotgun or a compact defensive pistol often find the AR-15 noticeably easier to keep on target shot after shot, precisely because there's so much less recoil to manage between each trigger pull. Less recoil means faster, more accurate follow-up shots, which matters enormously in an actual encounter, especially if more than one threat is involved, or if the first shot doesn't immediately neutralize the threat and a rapid second or third shot becomes necessary. This is one of the most consistent findings across defensive shooting instruction. The platform that lets an average shooter put multiple accurate hits on target the fastest, under real stress, isn't always the one people assume walking in the door. The AR-15 platform also typically offers a longer sight radius than a pistol, the distance between the front and rear sighting points, which generally makes it easier to achieve accurate hits quickly, especially for shooters who haven't logged the extensive trigger time needed to master handgun accuracy under stress. A pistol's short sight radius means small aiming errors get magnified significantly at distance, while a rifle's longer sight radius is inherently more forgiving of minor aiming imperfections, which matters even more when adrenaline is affecting fine motor control. Add a red dot optic, which is increasingly standard on home defense AR-15 configurations, and that accuracy advantage becomes even more pronounced for a shooter who hasn't spent years mastering iron sight alignment under pressure. A red dot essentially removes the sight alignment step entirely and lets the shooter focus purely on the target. Capacity is also a significant advantage. Standard magazines hold considerably more rounds than either a pistol or a shotgun without needing an extension, which matters if a reload becomes necessary mid-encounter or if more than one intruder is involved, a scenario that statistically is less common but carries outsized consequences if you're undergunned for it. A standard capacity AR-15 magazine gives you a substantial buffer most pistols and nearly all shotguns simply can't match without add-on hardware. And there's a common misconception worth addressing directly, because it's probably the single biggest reason new gun owners rule the AR-15 out before ever seriously considering it. A lot of people assume 5.56 is a worse choice than buckshot or a pistol round because of over-penetration concerns through interior walls. The fear that a rifle round will blow through drywall through a neighboring room and potentially endanger a family member or someone in an adjacent space. It's a completely reasonable fear to have, and it deserves a real answer rather than dismissal. Properly selected 5.56 defensive ammunition can, in some ballistic tests, penetrate interior walls differently than certain handgun or shotgun loads. But results vary widely by ammunition and wall construction, so the specific load matters. The trade-offs. The AR-15 offers manageable recoil and strong accuracy, but it's generally longer and less maneuverable indoors than a pistol. It can also be more expensive once you add appropriate sights, ammunition, a sling, and a light. Overall, the AR-15 offers excellent accuracy and controllability, but its size and cost are important drawbacks for home defense. Let's put all three side by side on the categories that actually matter, because breaking it down like this makes the trade-offs a lot clearer than just arguing in the abstract. Maneuverability. Pistol wins clearly, and it's not particularly close. A compact or full-size handgun can be moved through a doorway, around a corner, or held one-handed while opening a door, or guiding someone else to safety in a way neither long gun can match. Shotgun and AR-15 are both long guns, and both require more space and more deliberate technique to move through a home effectively without exposing the muzzle around corners before you do. That said, a shorter-barreled AR-15 configuration narrows this gap more than most people expect. A proper home defense carbine setup with a collapsed stock is considerably easier to maneuver than most people assume before they've actually handled one indoors. Recoil management and follow-up shot speed. AR-15 wins, somewhat surprisingly to a lot of new owners, who walk in assuming a rifle round means more punishing recoil. Pistol is second, with recoil that's manageable for most trained shooters, but still requires real practice to keep follow-up shots fast and accurate. Full-power shotgun buckshot is the most demanding of the three to manage well under stress, and it's also the platform where the gap between trained and untrained recoil management shows up the most dramatically. A trained shooter handles it fine. An untrained one often can't get back on target quickly. Capacity. AR-15 wins clearly, with standard magazines holding considerably more rounds than either alternative without any modification. Pistol is a solid second, depending on the specific model. Double-stack magazines in common defensive calibers offer a meaningful buffer. Shotgun trails behind both without a magazine extension, typically holding somewhere in the 5 to 8 round range depending on the model, which matters if a reload becomes necessary mid-encounter and there's no time to execute one smoothly. Ease of training to competence. This one's close between pistol and AR-15, and honestly depends on the individual shooter, their build, and how much dedicated practice time they're realistically going to put in. But a lot of professional defensive instructors will tell you a rifle's longer sight radius and lower recoil make it faster for a new shooter to become competent with than a handgun, which is a genuinely underrated point in this whole debate. Most new gun owners assume a pistol is the beginner option by default, when in a lot of documented instructor experience, new shooters often group tighter and build confidence faster on a rifle first. Deterrent factor and psychological impact. Shotgun edges this category largely due to the recognizability of the pump-action sound, which a lot of people, including some who've never handled a firearm, immediately recognize and understand the meaning of. That said, this shouldn't be anyone's primary decision-making factor. Relying on a sound to end a confrontation isn't a plan, it's a hopeful bonus on top of an actual plan. Cost of entry. Pistol and shotgun are generally more accessible price points than a quality AR-15 setup, with optics, quality defensive ammunition, and a light or sling. A complete, properly configured setup on any of these three costs more than just the base firearm alone. but that gap is most pronounced with the AR-15. That said, this gap has narrowed significantly in recent years as AR-15 pricing has become more competitive across the market, with quality entry-level options now sitting a lot closer to shotgun and pistol price points than they did even 5 or 10 years ago. Low light and target identification. This is a category that doesn't get discussed enough, and it matters for every option here, not just one. Positively identifying a threat before firing, making sure you know exactly what and who you're aiming at in a dark house, is arguably more important than any ballistic comparison in this entire video, and it depends far more on whether you've got a proper weapon-mounted light and have trained with it than on which of these 3 platforms you're holding. A dedicated light, mounted and trained with, matters more to your actual safety and legal defensibility than the platform underneath it. Storage and access speed. Pistols generally offer the fastest, most compact, secure storage options. Quality quick-access safes designed specifically for a handgun by a nightstand. Long guns require a larger footprint, though modern quick-access long gun safes have closed a lot of that gap in recent years, especially for a shorter-barreled AR-15 configuration, built specifically with home defense storage in mind. Here's the honest answer, and it's not the exciting one. The best home defense gun is the one you've actually trained with, that fits your specific home's layout, and that you can operate confidently and accurately under real stress, not just at a calm afternoon range session where there's no adrenaline, no darkness, and no decision to make in half a second. Think about your own home for a second, because the right answer genuinely changes depending on the details. If your home has tight hallways, and you might need one hand free, maybe you've got kids down the hall you'd need to reach, or a layout with sharp corners and narrow doorways. A pistol you've put real training time into is a completely legitimate, often ideal choice. Nobody should talk you out of a pistol setup if it fits your home and you've actually trained with it under realistic conditions, including in the dark, because that's when you'll actually need it. If you want maximum deterrent effect and stopping power in a single trigger pull, and you've trained specifically to manage the recoil so it doesn't slow down a follow-up shot if one's needed, a shotgun remains a genuinely excellent option. It earned its reputation honestly, over generations of use. And that reputation isn't just tradition for its own sake. There's a reason it's been the default recommendation for so long, and a lot of that reason still holds up today for the right home and the right hunter. And if you want the most accurate, most controllable, highest capacity option, and your home layout allows for the extra length, a longer hallway, an open floor plan, or simply a household where maneuverability is less of a constraint, the AR-15's advantages in recoil management and follow-up shot speed are, in my opinion, genuinely underrated by a lot of first-time buyers who dismiss it as too much gun before ever actually shooting one side by side against the other 2 options. A lot of people who make that assumption change their mind the first time they put rounds through one and realize how much easier it actually is to stay on target compared to what they expected. Here's something else worth sitting with. The right answer for your household might not even be just one of these 3. Some of the most well-thought-out home defense plans use a primary option matched to the likely scenario, with a backup that covers the gaps the primary can't. A pistol for the fast, close-quarters reality of most home encounters, with a rifle or shotgun as a secondary option if things escalate or if there's more time to reach it. There's no rule that says you have to pick exactly one and never think about it again. The mistake isn't picking any one of these 3. The mistake is picking one, putting it in a safe, and never training with it under any kind of realistic pressure or low-light condition before you actually need it. Because the version of you operating that gun at 2 a.m., half asleep, running on adrenaline, is not the same version of you that shot a relaxed group at the range on a Saturday afternoon. If the first time you've ever handled that gun in the dark, under stress, with your heart rate through the roof, is the actual night you need it, you haven't made a choice yet. You've just bought a tool and hoped. Put in the training now, on your own schedule, when the stakes are zero, so that the decision's already made and the movements are already automatic by the time it actually matters. So here's what I want you to walk away with. This was never really a question of which gun is objectively best. It's a question of which gun fits your home, your physical capabilities, and how much training time you're honestly willing to put in. Because every single one of these three options, in trained hands, is a completely viable home defense tool, and every single one of them, in untrained hands, is a liability.